That's your baptism. That's your Enkidu. That's your Atman. That's your Brahman. Okay? And remember, again, you don't have to be spiritual for this stuff. If life has taught you something profoundly exotic, beautiful, miserable from relationship, if you've understood the anatomy of relationships, you are blessed. You are mature in that department. If you've understood the difficulties of educating people, that understanding baptizes you. If you understand that it is dangerous to park your car at 2 a.m. and walk to 7-Eleven when you see hoodlums around you, that understanding baptizes you. It keeps you from harm's way. It saves your life. Your mom will continue to have a daughter or a son. You will be a mother to your children, a husband to your wife. All of us in this class have understandings according to our capacity and our needs and our desires. Lena, if you need to leave, it's okay. Thank you. It's good to see you. You too. Now, let me kind of say a couple of things about understanding. There is you understanding the things that have been given to you. There is you understanding the difficulties of the path, understanding of the anatomy, the structure of making efforts, understanding the two noble truths, understanding how difficult it is to be mindful, how easy it is to forget and become complacent and fall into sloth, how difficult it is to have the right images, right people around you that can inspire and push you towards the two noble truths, okay? And then there is this understanding that you need to have in communicating your understanding to other people. So remember, one is inward. This first understanding has to do with you and who you are, what you are, and the path you've been on. No one can give that to you. Okay? The second, understanding your interaction with other people. In terms of you giving your wisdom understanding to others. That requires a whole different path. You have to make an effort. Where are people at? What are they ready for? What can they actually apply in their own life? There's a story that comes from the Muslim tradition. A mother goes to Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, and his disciples or students are sitting there. And she says to Muhammad, "My son eats too many candies. It's bad for him. I keep telling him, but he doesn't listen. Can you please do something?" Muhammad looks at this kid and says, "Please, stop eating so many candies. Listen to your mom." And the boy cried and says, "Okay, I promise I will never eat candies again." And the mother comes back to Muhammad after a few weeks and says, "Thank you. My son has no cavities." 2 days later, another mother goes to Muhammad and says, "This is my son. He eats candies all the time. Please, can you do something?" Muhammad gets up and slaps the kid really, really hard. And the kid starts crying. And his mother is dumbfounded. She goes and grabs the kid and hugs him, looks at mom and says, "What the hell are you doing?" He's never going to eat candies again. Two mothers, same issue, but two completely different approaches. With some people, you sit quietly. With some people, you talk. With some people, you play music. With some people, you read. It's not a one-size-fits-all. The task of a really, really good teacher is to understand what his students or her students are ready for, and then give them what they need accordingly. Not too much, not too little, just right. Okay? Once you have this thing called understanding, for the first time, you will have something you've never had in your life. You'll be able to think well about things. Not spiritual things alone. Everything. When I was a young kid, I ran into this man. His name was Hussein, whom I considered to be my teacher for about 10 years, and then he became a family friend for about 40 years, and he died of cancer a year or two ago. One day, he said to me, "I'm not sure how much more I have to live." And so he paid off his house. He balanced everything out. And then when he passed away, the only thing that his wife needs to do is pay the property taxes. There are no loans. There's no debt. They don't owe anything to anybody. His wife teaches philosophy, humanities, religious studies. She's a great artist. This is what we call worldly wisdom. You make peace with the fact that you will die. This is your wife. Give her what little security you can. Pay off the goddamn house. She's a mother. She needs to stay home with her daughter. She doesn't need to run around chasing money to pay rent, to pay mortgage. So when you have understanding, you look back at life and you understand the way life works. And then you begin to think about things. When someone comes to me and says, "I'm really interested in these ideas," I don't tell them to sit and meditate. I say, "Do you have any degrees?" If they say no, I say, "Listen, forget all these ideas. You need to go back to school. You need to get your degree in humanities and philosophy. I am the chair. I will get you jobs. I will open the door, then you're on your own." Because I know what it means to get to be 50 or 60 and not have health care. Not have a place of your own. Because once in a while, especially when you get older, you want to go into the backyard and garden. That's the only peace you have. You don't want to be harassed by your body. You don't want to be harassed by your landlord. You don't want to be harassed by financial issues. Security. And I tell them, give me 2 years of your life. Go to school. Get a degree. Let me give you a job. And then if you're still interested in ideas, fine. We can sit and talk. Okay? So again, remember, what the Buddha has to go through and what his remedy for us is, for our emotional, intellectual, psychological, and spiritual health. You have to go through all the stuff and wait, hoping that understanding will come to you. And then you have to figure out how to kind of put all the stuff in language, in thinking, in expressing. Once you have been relatively successful in having coherent thoughts that have substance, remember initially you pursue the stuff because it's beyond rationality and reason. When you have understanding, now you need rationality and reason. You need to house your understanding in language. Okay? You can't be an idiot. It's no good having wisdom and then unable to share it because you're too dumb. Once you have put everything into thought, now comes the physical part, which is speech. Now your understanding, your wisdom, all the things you have gone through, your interpretation of old age, your interpretation of sickness, your interpretation of death, that life being a cradle of sorrow, that everything in life is disappointing, everything. Now when you speak, your audience can smell. You know, like when you go on College or Grand Avenue and you pass by a restaurant, and even though you're not very hungry, really, you smell this food, and you look at your companion, they just call him Greg, and you say, let's go have Chinese food. You and I will recognize the language, the speech, the lecture, the sermon of anyone that has the fragrance, the scent of mindfulness, of focusedness, of effort, of sacrifice, of suffering, of understanding, and of thinking. Now you may want to go home and ask yourself, why do I feel so drawn? And that is not your responsibility. That is not the position you want to have. Naturally, you're curious. You want to know why you feel a certain way when someone like Jordan Peterson talks. Why you feel a certain way when Malcolm X talks. Why you feel a certain way when Mahatma Gandhi talks. And that's none of your goddamn business. These people are muses. They are there to inspire. Okay? When you go to the Rose Garden in Berkeley and you smell the scent of the rose, you don't sit there and say, I wonder why this smells so beautifully. You just go closer and you just take a deep inhalation. Even though you know you can't stay there for too long, you enjoy the moments you have with the rose. And the rose hopes for only one thing, that it has inspired you so much so that you will go to Home Depot and you buy 51-gallon rose bushes, and you're going to go there and plant them. Malcolm X does not want followers. He wants a replica, a duplicate of Malcolm X. So speech, it needs to be impactful, and the only way it can be potent, the only way it can be transformative, if it has been touched, seasoned, refined, by his or her observation of old age, sickness, and death, the sorrows of life, the insecurities of life, the difficulties of making effort, the difficulties of combating sloth and forgetfulness. The other thing you need to understand about all this stuff is that if you take this stuff seriously, you become emotionally homeless. There is nothing in life that can inspire you except those who can bring about the right kind of sorrows. Out of this sorrow, the right kind of reflection comes about. The right kind of networks of thoughts come about. The right kind of emotions come about. Last night, after this class, the class impacted me, myself. I'm usually sometimes get a little weirded out by, our conversations. So I went home and I said, I just need to watch a really, really good movie. A movie I've watched plenty of times in the past. It's called Stigmata. That the passions of a certain priest, lives inside a rosary. A rosary is purchased by a mother, sent to a daughter, but the power inside the rosary, is transmitted to this woman, and all of a sudden, she has the 5 wounds of Christ. Okay? So again, going back to speech. So make sure your language is seasoned. And the only way, again, it can be seasoned is if you have really understood your experiences. Now here comes the more difficult part, because now you go back, as Socrates would say, you become a social animal. You go into society. That's your return. And that's where you begin to have actions. You begin to function in society. But you need to make sure that society does not force you into forgetfulness. So the 8th step is about action, is about ethics, it's about conduct, it's about how you behave with other people or in society. Now here's the thing you need to understand. Your actions and your presence must be a powerhouse that remind people of desires, of attachments, of impermanence, of disappointments, of the 4 Noble Truths. In the book, Daughter of Fire, every time Irina just sees Bhai Sahib, she just becomes sad. She feels incompetent, incomplete, unfulfilled, miserable, homeless. He doesn't have to say anything. He doesn't have to do anything. رو به گورستان دمی خاموش نشین آن سخنگوی خاموشان را ببین. That go to the cemetery. No one speaks. And yet their silence speaks to you in volumes. It will remind you of your future. The cemetery is a powerhouse. And then as you walk, as you behave, okay, all the things we have talked about thus far, old age and sickness and death. And remember, this is the only way that humility is achieved. To combat pride, the 4 Noble Truths will allow you to experience humility. The only way you will combat sloth and forgetfulness is concentration, being aware of the 4 Noble Truths. Okay? And there is this last final thing. It's called having the right livelihood. When you have understood something really, really, really well, there are two options for you. You will either enter a profession through which you can express the path you have been on for the past 25, 30, 40 years, that you make your living by talking. You will make your living by making movies, by dancing, by playing music. Or you will work for the state. You will work at In-N-Out. But you have entered the stage, a certain maturity, that though you were working with lumber, with hammers, with nails, you will never forget who you are, what you are, and the path that you have been on, and you continue to be on. That there is no force in life except death that can distract you from forgetting your understanding. If, on the other hand, you are still a novice, but you have understanding, do not go to Home Depot and work there. Why? Your understanding will be snatched away. You will forget. You will become contaminated. And remember, understanding, something I forgot to mention before we continue with livelihood. Understanding. Understanding gives you a tremendous amount of power. In Buddha's life, when you have understanding, you have magical powers. You can read other minds. You can know where they have been, what they have been doing. You have access to people's interior in ways that they themselves don't. Now, if you're young, if you're a novice, like anything else in life, power will get you drunk. And though your intentions may be good, because you're new, in this world of power given to you by understanding, you will become contaminated. Like Gilgamesh. Okay. As you move on, as you become more mature, more seasoned, as your understanding grows, you will use this power only to benefit others, never yourself. When I go to Roseville, my father enjoys very much talking politics and religion. And I have a thing or two to say about almost anything under the sun. But because I know my father is 90, and because I know he doesn't have much time left, because I know without these conversations his brain will turn into mush, I will hold my tongue. I will not allow my arrogance, my pride, my understanding to get in the way and interrupt my father. I will let him talk and talk and talk and talk, and I will receive him as much capacity as I have. Okay? Now, We all have a physical body. The body needs food. Livelihood can be interpreted in a variety of different ways. Some people need nourishment. I mean, that's what livelihood is. Some people need money to survive in their physical life. Some people need emotional nourishment. Some people need psychological nourishment. Some people need intellectual nourishment. Some people need spiritual nourishments. Someone like the Buddha needs to understand where people are, what they need, and give to them exactly what they're ready to receive. You know that saying in the New Testament, man does not live by bread alone? You know, it is such a profound and rich statement. Go out there and see a homeless person. And when they ask you for some money so they can buy bread, open the Bible and read to them. You don't live by bread alone. And that's the most cruel thing you could ever do to any human being. It is true, human beings don't live by bread alone. But what kind of a human being? The one whose stomach does not cry for food. The one whose flesh does not cry out because it's cold. My wife keeps telling me I should write a book about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Because every time she comes and hears me talk about this stuff, she says, you just need to correct the way people think about Buddhism. And I say, it's just too much work. It's easier to talk about them than to write them down. So the point I'm trying to make is when you walk into the world of the Buddha, or Moses, or Jesus, or Muhammad, or Confucius, or Lao Tzu, consider that their teachings, their experience to be like the burning bush. Remove your sandals. Take a shower beforehand. Be clean. Approach them respectfully. Because they have really, really, really paid such a huge sacrifice to understand so little of life, and yet very profound. There are other things I could say about the tradition, but I will stop here and maybe start our conversation on Taoism a little. If, on the other hand, you find yourself exhausted, there is no reason to stay any longer. We can just go home. I leave that up to you. I know Karen has to leave around 8. Yeah. Yeah. So how many of you want to do Taoism, or do you just want to go home and relax? You should definitely take some cookies for Greg. It'll show him that you think of him. And you want to make sure he becomes diabetic. Any questions or comments before we continue? Nothing? What question?
Told me told you to tell us. And then I asked you how you did it.
Ah.
And then you told me to tell you us.
Okay. Phoebe's question is rather personal. Personal in the sense that it's very personal for me because it's about me. So I'm going to kind of change your question and change the narrative a little bit, so I'm not fully involved in my response to your question. Krishnamurti was an Indian sage. He was born in, 18 something, and he died in 1980 something. Forget 85, 86. And most of the people who have written about him, they say he was always restless, always restless. And to some extent, I think all children are restless. They don't enjoy the adult world. It's too stale for them, always jumping and breaking things. I think some people are just born to be restless. I don't know why. I suppose I could put myself in that category. And then out of this restlessness comes a good amount of confusion. And the problem is when you're a kid, you look at other kids, you look at your brother, you look at your sister, you look at your friends, and they're all going somewhere. When I was young, my brother already had his master's. My sister was a pharmacist. My brother was making about 70 or 80,000 in the 1990s. I was washing cars. And, and you can't claim maturity at that age. You still are very competitive deep down. You want to belong. You want to be as stable, as secure. And, you want people to like you. And there is nothing about you to like. You dropped out of high school, you dropped out of college. You don't speak well, you don't think well, nothing about your life is going well. Your parents are embarrassed by you, ashamed. They spend all this money, you've just become a bum. So I think when you find yourself in places of restlessness, you begin to punish yourself enormously, and you're just walking around like a volcano ready to erupt. And you do erupt, especially if you don't have the tools to pacify yourself the right way, to quiet the screaming voice within. And then I was lucky enough to run into a man, sane. I don't know why. After 6 months, I really went there because of my father. And then eventually, after 6 months, I said to myself, man, this guy is right. Life really sucks. And it's devastating when you kind of come to that particular conclusion when you're 19. I mean, you're 19, you're young, you're a guy, you're a kid. You want to go out there and have fun. You want to date people. You want to hang out with your friends. But no, he's just ruined it for you. He's ruined the whole thing for you. And then what happens is you go to your room and you paint it black. Your entertainment is, is just reading books. And then when you talk to your friends, you realize you guys have no longer anything in common. And you just part ways. And most of your friends are like in their 50s and 60s and 70s. They're all married. They have security. And as a young kid, you kind of look at them and say, well, I want what they have. So you have a good amount of envy and anger and even hatred. And you hate the fact that this man has put you in this purgatory. That in essence, he has made you fall in love with him, and yet he doesn't give you rest. I mean, he gives you rest when you go to his house. He gives you rest when you talk to him for like 10, 15, 20 hours. He's giving you rest, but only when you're around him. When you're far away from him, you just don't know what to do with your life. You can't commit to anyone. You can't do anything. You hate yourself. You hate life. You hate the fact that your parents gave you birth, and you just suck as a human being. And then, out of desperation, you just go to school. You go to school and you study philosophy and religion because, well, that's what you've been doing for the past 10 years. Why not just continue with that? And you get your degrees. And I remember saying to myself, I'm going to major in philosophy, thinking that I'm going to walk to my class and Socrates is going to walk in. It was horrible. It was 20 years of going to school and having instructors who truly, truly, truly were just awful. And I remember going to a saint saying, this sucks. And he would say, well, drop school, drop your classes. Are you kidding? You made my life a living hell, and now when I come to you saying school sucks, you tell me just drop and do what? Wash cars for the rest of my life? And he says yes. And then, I get all these degrees. I go to interviews in hopes of getting a job. The problem is this. You have been living in this cave for almost 15, 20 years. And now you have to go get a job. It means you go to the interviews. You have no idea how to be with other people. You have no idea how to talk to other people. So they ask you, well, tell us a little bit about yourself. I was confused. I'm still confused. I don't really know what books I'm going to use in these classes. I'm not going to grade students because understanding, education takes place gradually. Well, who's going to give you a goddamn job? Nobody. They're going to look at you as like a joke. And then you have the degrees, you go to the interviews, you realize, well, you suck as a candidate. And then little by little you say, you know what? I don't mind working at the car wash for the rest of my life. I'm okay. I can read, I can write, I can think, I talk to customers once in a while. That's all I need. And you kind of make peace. And once you make peace, something really strange happens. The moment you make peace, you become indifferent to things out there. And I don't know when or how that happens. So I go to the interview and they say, well, tell us about yourself. And I say, well, let me just tell you, you're not interviewing me, I'm interviewing you. And then I go on a rampage. And you get a call. Can you come back for a second interview? Why should we hire you? I'm great at what I do. And then you get a call the next day. We're going to offer you a position. Yeah, I need a couple of weeks to think about it. And the truth is, most of it is out of your hands. You can only really do so much. After a while, you kind of just make peace and you just sit. And if things happen, fine. If they don't happen, fine. It's kind of like a very, very mature young woman who desperately wants to get married and have a family and goes out with men only to realize she hasn't found anyone who, rises up to a family man. And then she screams, she shouts mostly inwardly. And there comes a point where she looks at herself in the mirror and says, man, I'm 39, 40. I don't think I can have children anymore. And then she says, that's fine. I've been alone for the past 20 years. I'll continue to be alone. But it's an aloneness that's profoundly healthy. So the point I'm trying to make, Phoebe, is the following. You need to work really, really hard. You need to read a lot of books. You need to think a lot of thoughts. And you need to have a good amount of negative emotions. And they're going to be with you for a long, long time. Eventually, the dust will settle. Learn from the Eskimos, the Inuits. Learn from the Arabs. When there is a sandstorm, when there is a snowstorm, they sit in the middle of this mess. Eventually, they know something, that the storm will die. And then they get up and walk. Never make a decision when there's a storm. You're far too blind. Never make a decision when you're in love. You're far too intoxicated. Make decisions when you're sober. Always. If you wait, maturity will come to you. Karen, it's really good to see you. Please take some cookies, otherwise they'll just go bad. You have a lot of pockets. Okay. Oh, you're eyeing a few. Go ahead. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Well, it's good to see all of you. Have a good night. Have a nice weekend. See you next week, Monday. Tell Greg I said hi. Thank you. Well, if you have no questions or no comments, you're free to go. If you do have questions or comments, we can stay for another 5 minutes, but no more. Jane, what is there to say? You're a wise woman. Bibi, you're also very wise. Lara, Colombians have been known for wisdom. Bridget, yes. You're a saint. There is no reason. Stacy, thank you. Kenning, eat well, sleep well, enjoy. Tell your family I said hello. See you next week. Thank you. Thank you.